Good morning, and a warm welcome to the event, The Future of AI in Asia. I'm Yan Yan from the Singapore Economic Development Board, and I'm your moderator for this session. So a little bit about the EDB first. We are a government agency of Singapore, and we support companies from around the world to establish their presence in Singapore and capture opportunities in Asia. We provide information, connections to the ecosystem, as well as incentives to support some value-added activities. So in today's Fireside Chat and Networking session, we'll be discussing the market opportunities in AI for European companies and investors, thinking about what is out there in Asia, and how Singapore's tech ecosystem provides the funding, talents, and research and innovation capabilities to help you scale your business. The AI market is growing rapidly in Asia. There is the expected CAGR of 24.5%, and by 2026, the market will be worth 50 billion. So it's not, that far off. So today, with the help of our experts here, we'll aim to answer one key question: how can European companies and investors take advantage of the market opportunities in Asia's rapid digitalization and adoption of AI? So if you have any questions for our speakers, feel free to pop them in to the pigeonhole shown here on the screen. And to start us off, I'm very pleased to introduce our expert panel, comprising Mr. Mike Beck, Global CISO of Darktrace, Nicholas Meyer, Managing Director of Direct Investments at Temasek, Ulf Brackmann, Vice President AI Technology at SAP, and my colleague YC Choi, Vice President and Head of Region for Europe at EDB. So, panelists, thank you so much for taking time here with us. If you could start with a quick introduction to yourselves and your organizations. Mike, could you start, please?
Perfect. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Mike Beck. I'm Global CISO at Darktrace. Darktrace is a 10-year-old cyber AI company. So we've only ever kind of used AI inside our software to catch evidence of attackers inside digital systems. And we have our Asian hub in Singapore.
Nicholas.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nicholas. I'm an investment professional here in Europe, focusing on technology as part of the global team at Temasek. And Temasek is a long-term investment company headquartered in Singapore. So we're one of the two long-term vehicles of the state of Singapore, GIC, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and then we are the industrial holding. So originally founded in the 60s to manage the previously state-owned assets, and then over time internationalized our portfolio. So it used to be a 350 million portfolio in the 60s, now 300 billion, and really globally diversified, predominantly equity, a bit of credit, and a bit of funds, but mainly equity, both public markets and private markets, and really across the entire maturity from early stage venture, late stage growth to mature businesses in Asia, in Europe, and in the US. So really pleased to be here.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Ulf. I'm part of our central AI development team in SAP, and SAP it's a global company, basically providing enterprise software that runs any kind of critical business process you could think about. Of course, we are heavily investing into AI and how AI provides business value to our customers. With Singapore, we have we are a global team, obviously, and Singapore is one of our development hubs with a strong focus on AI that we are also significantly expanding right now. And of course, not just providing us talent and getting developers in there, but also obviously Singapore is a big market for us as much as Southeast Asia.
Hi everyone, my name is Troy. Thanks for joining us here today in this more intimate setting where I'm looking forward to speak and connect with you guys later. Name is Troy, same organization as Yan Yan, the EDB in Singapore. Obviously, it's a public agency, headquarters is in Singapore, but actually we have a big team here in Europe, including Amsterdam, Paris, London, Germany, essentially where the tech hubs and the industrial hubs are in Europe. And we wear two hats. I think the first hat that we wear is to support companies to set up in Singapore for their operations in Asia. And companies like Darktrace, SAP have presence in Singapore for Asian and even global activities. Also, we do that for talent, for owners and intermediaries of capital like family offices and VCs as well. So that's the first hat that we wear. The second hat that we wear is an industry development role. So we look across different industry sectors where we think companies in Singapore, not just Singaporean companies, but companies in Singapore can be competitive, and then we take an active role to grow that sector. And obviously that includes tech, and within tech, I think AI and increasingly generative AI would be a big topic. It is a big topic for us. Thanks.
Thanks, panelists. So to jump right into the first question, they say AI is like the new electricity, right? You can do so much with it. There's so many different application areas. So I wanted to understand what would be your strategy for AI. How do you interact with the AI ecosystem? And I would like to start with the two computer scientists by training. No pressure. Maybe Wolf, you could go first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, overall, our strategy and what's important to mention, and I think this is clear to everyone attending this conference, but sometimes it doesn't seem to be clear to everyone out there. AI hasn't started mid of last year, right? So I mean, it has been around since quite a while. And of course, we have been infusing AI in the product portfolio already since quite a while. But of course, the hype around Gen AI gives us a great momentum to really also show what is already there, and then take it to the next level and say there are so many areas of application now for narrow AI as much as for broad AI. So our overall strategy is to infuse artificial intelligence across our product portfolio. Basically to really focus on the value that we can provide to our customers, doing things in a more automated way, maybe doing things that are not possible without AI, and by that really increase the value that we can provide through our software. So the areas of application, just to give a bit of more context, of course there are more classical things like doing recommendations, being able to understand unstructured information, predicting, doing analytics. I mean, all of that is of course part of the portfolio. And now with Gen AI going even further, there's a complete new different way how you can interact with the system through something like a digital assistant in completely natural language. And that offers a tremendous opportunity to revolutionize the user experience that you have with the software, but also just looking at the things that you could do. And I mean, happy to chat afterwards about individual use cases, because I think I could go on for another hour just to explain what is now possible and what we're doing, and it's quite exciting, to be honest.
Yeah. And Mike, Darktrace helps over 8,000 companies protect their businesses. So AI is not new to you as well. So how has that been going for you?
Yeah, it's Ulf and I had this exact conversation kind of this morning when we just started chatting. I think, for us, it's been a 10-year journey. We were using AI from the start, and I think one of the things that's kind of really important, and I'm sure many of you know this in the audience, not all AI is equal, right? There's different applications, there's different learning algorithms, there's different kind of techniques that can be used, and there's different ways to satisfy your end customer requirements. One of the big things for us is using unsupervised machine learning so that we can make sure it's only applied on data sets that belong to the customer, so that we don't blend it in other ways. And some of those things, some of those techniques are very important when you kind of bring that out into the kind of the commercial world as well. I think if I look just kind of from my CISO role and speaking to other chief security officers kind of globally, there's this sudden, we can't deny what generative AI has done to demand, right? It's crazy, and we're certainly seeing pressure coming board downwards into the operation to be like, where are we using AI? How are we using it? And these sort of conversations are starting to really change the shape, I think, in terms of your question, the opportunity of AI is all about the kind of conversation and where it heads now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all organizations are feeling that pressure, being asked, what are you using AI for? How are you using it? So what about Temasek? You have different capabilities.
Yeah.
You invest in different technologies.
Yeah, I had to smile when Mike said it because ultimately we as investors we often sit on these boards and we're exactly the guys who ask these questions, which probably then trickle through the system, right? And kind of like increase the sense of urgency, I would assume. But so I think like for us, it's probably the first time when AI kind of like specifically featured in our investment strategy was in 2018, where we built it out. I mean, we saw that there was something emerging around AI, but also around blockchain, and so we staffed a cross-functional team to the opportunity to explore this and kind of like learn in this field more progressively. As a long-term investor, we always build kind of like at every beginning of the decade, we build a 10-year strategy. So currently we're executing against our T2030 strategy. And I think like that has mainly three pillars. One is like being future-ready capabilities for us as kind of like for the talent which is on our platform. So how do you enable people to use AI and to be a citizen user? Many of them don't come with a technical background. So that's about talent. Then the second thing is like how do we think about strategic portfolio construction over the long term, which then guides our decision making in the more short term when we actually do make investments. And there obviously digitalization and as part of that AI has a central role. And then thirdly, and that's the benefit of having really like a 300 billion platform, is that we can actually reserve some capabilities where we create horizontal competence centers, which we can then use for kind of like internal augmentation purposes, but also to engage with our portfolio companies and then actually co-develop and create use cases and capture value opportunities. And so that's around digitalization, around cybersecurity, around AI, blockchain, and sustainability. And so that's, I think, like how we're set up at the moment. But we're reinventing ourselves on a frequent basis. I think it's quite important during this time where you see kind of the pace of innovation is so high.
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo the point that AI is not new. And I think the deployment and application is really where we need to think about. I mean, for some of you guys, we have sort of sat through the past few years from COVID to now, the hype around Web3, blockchain, metaverse. We have seen that hype gone up and down. And I think for us, our focus in Singapore and for Asia is really about, okay, where is the application, where is the deployment, where are the real world use cases? Because we believe that that's where the real world impact will be. And to be completely utilitarian, that's where the long-term business models, where the monetization will be as well. So I think generative AI is very pertinent in that regard because this is the path that we're on. I mean, if we look across the dynamics of the stack, we have already assessed that, at the compute, cloud, and the foundation model level, just a handful of players will come to dominate, right? I think that's the dynamic that you guys are quite familiar with as well, just because of the amount of compute, data sets, talent, resources required. A few players will come to dominate in that stack from compute, cloud, foundation model. But I think in the application stack, from the fine-tuning, the deployment, the use cases, is where the space is still very nascent, proportionate to the sort of relative to the potential there is. And I think that's where we are focusing on in Singapore. So in the regard, I think what we're trying to do is to work with some of the players in that sort of lower stack, players like Google, where we'll work with them to create what we call AI Trailblazers program. So that's quite interesting because in that program, we work with them to avail their compute, cloud, and model stack for 100 companies, organizations, over 100 days at no cost, so that they can develop through a sprint some MVPs for generative AI. Because that's where we think you can open up the funnel and create real world impact. And we do the same with AWS. They've selected 13 startups across the Southeast Asian region, trying to develop some of these the use cases as well. And I think that threat for us continues, because what we want to do is to avail again that stack for both other companies, other large corporates from American Express to the tech companies region like Tokopedia, to government agencies as well, because we create some lead demand on our side from the adoption. How do we open up that stack and create a meaningful real-world impact?
Yeah, thanks, Troy. There are a lot of questions coming in, so I just want to pivot a little bit to what are the differences you see in terms of AI applications in Asia and against the rest of the world, be it Europe or Silicon Valley. And there was even a question around China. Legislation differs from country to country. So what would be your advice in terms of navigating these different landscapes? Wolf?
I'll go
Mike,
very
yeah?
quickly because my field of view is very narrow, right? I'm in a cybersecurity kind of vertical here, and I'd say that in that type of field, there's just demand everywhere at the moment, right? I'm not seeing anything that's kind of constraining that in terms of legislation or anything like that. But cybersecurity is incredibly narrow, so I'll leave it to the rest of the guys to kind of talk more broadly in their fields. But for me, in the cyber world, you can certainly see in the Asian market, there is a huge amount of interest in utilizing AI inside their security operations. There is a global talent shortage in terms of people being able to kind of do cybersecurity, and AI is definitely seen in Asia as a means to enabling that.
Maybe to add to that, I mean, first of all, when we think about the business of enterprise software, we don't develop software individually per region, right? So there's not one version for Asia, one version for Europe, one for the US. However, there are obviously certain specifics that we then localize. This is the space that we're operating in. So I wouldn't say that there is a difference in the way that software has to be. However, where I see or where we see a difference is in the way that there is a certain openness, for instance, to new technologies, right? So this is where we're also the way the way that education systems work, the way that people are exposed to technology. I think one key difference in Asia that I have perceived is the openness and the willingness to be very fast and very early on when it comes to new technologies, right? So, and then there are other regions where companies or people in general might be more hesitant, or rather see the risk and saying, this is what. And of course there are risks. I mean, no need to shy away from that. But the question is how you look at it, right? The question is, what do you see first and what do you focus on? And this is where I clearly see a difference. And also, and yeah, I said, the way that then also then the next generation is exposed to technology, which of course then trickles down in how the education system, what you then already know when you enter school, what you then already know when you go to university. That of course is also why we as a global company try to tap into talent pools around the world so that we really get the best out of that ecosystem, because it's not like, it's always a balance. We can always argue it's good to always jump on the latest and new things and new technology, and rather than saying, I wait and see, and maybe that goes away, or maybe there are so many more risks, and having a mixture of that is, I think, the best that you can have, because then you can think about risks. You have people who will tell you, oh, that's why it's not working. You have people who are all excited and go all in, and the mixture of that makes a difference for me, and that's why it's so important for a global company to I don't know, not develop in Germany and then roll it out to the world, and then everyone is hopefully getting it, so to say. It has to be a global team. It has to be. This is from my perspective how you need to operate in a global setting, and then take the best out of all worlds. But the software itself, I don't see major difference in saying this is how we need to do it completely different in Asia as we have to do it in Europe.
I think picking up on that point of risk versus return, Nicholas, you're in that business of risk and returns. Maybe beyond AI, across all of the different technology areas that you guys have seen, where do you think are the differences between Europe and Asia?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, I think just to add to Mike and Ulf, I think AI is really a global development, and I think that's also the difficulty to regulate it kind of on a regional level, because talent is mobile, data is mobile. I think so. We look at it really with a global lens and try to be present in all the hubs where innovation happens. really spot this. But I think like from an investment perspective, I think our stance is the following, and that's also captured in the fact that we've started with AI actually like reasonably early on, kind of 5-6 years ago, that we want to educate ourselves with pace. We want to engage with the ecosystem. So that means like the community, but also the regulators, the universities, etc. But when it comes to actual investments, we are cautious because we can see definitely a certain hype around it, reflected in valuations of very early stage business models. That doesn't mean that we're not interested. We're looking, we're analyzing, we're engaging. And most of these businesses will mature, but we would like to see kind of like winners emerging and more clarity around the business and monetization models and also around the structural modes. I mean, we were talking about the application layer, and that's the most interesting bit. I think like at the moment, I think that's probably also the most nascent bit. So I think like where we are definitely active is in kind of like in the around enablers, picks and shovels, where along that chain, and that can go from data centers, hyperscalers, provide compute like chips, semiconductors, and then the whole software and data tooling infrastructure stack. I think like that's interesting, and I think like what we shouldn't forget, and probably that's hopefully Ulf agrees with me and Mike as well, is that like I think there for established companies that have the resources, so tech capabilities, talent, funding, compute, and have the innovation capabilities, we do think like that there is significant value capture for these businesses if they tackle the opportunity on the front foot. Not everybody can tackle it on the front foot. I mean, SAP has the financial flexibility to ideate and potentially also invest or burn a bit of money with some of the initiatives which you're launching. I think like if I was in a early stage company, I would be like very thoughtful about the revenue model, because ultimately with every service you provide, there is a cost associated with it. I think like here it's not insignificant, and it's probably depending on user adoption, less controllable than in other formats. And so I think like this is going to be a long-term phenomenon. This is like broadband internet or cloud computing. And so I think like I would think businesses are well advised to progress at pace, but don't just stumble into like perceived revenue opportunities, which could also become loss leaders.
I hear that note of caution, and I hear a few points around regulation. We need to approach it from a very deliberate standpoint. Perhaps, Choi, you could share a little bit about how the Singapore government is thinking about AI, how you're helping companies, and also, actually, there was one question, how EDB itself is using AI.
Yeah. No, I echo the point we've mentioned that I think in general, Asia sees faster adoption. And I say that with a lot of caveats and nuances, right? Because, the EU is a single market, but there's so many different countries at different stages of development, both in tech and economic development, and of course, different business cultures as well. And Asia is a bigger monster, right? We're not even a single market. And I think if you talk, from Central Asia to Southeast Asia to Northeast Asia, these are very different countries, markets, and jurisdictions. But I see two differences with those nuances. I think the first is there is that sense of leapfrogging when it comes to new technologies in Asia. Just as if we take that mobile revolution, right? I mean, a lot of countries and demographics in Asia didn't have computers and laptops to start with. So when there was that mobile and app revolution, I think there was a leapfrogging when a lot of markets and countries just went from sort of nothing to a mobile. So today we're the most sort of mobile penetrated region in the world, partly because of that, right? So there's faster adoption because of that leapfrogging impact. So I guess when it comes to AI, it's quite interesting to see in the markets of Asia where it's not been penetrated by previous iterations of technology, and there's this leapfrogging dynamic going on. I think the second slight difference is also about regulation. And of course, there's a huge debate about regulation of AI and generative AI going on. The EU AI Act, US taking a stance, there's the sort of perspective in China as well. But I think in Asia, and using Singapore as an example, our instinct is not to jump into hard regulation anytime a new technology comes out. Because, first of all, we have to strike the balance between, yes, we need to ensure safe and ethical use of AI, for example, or any new technology. That must be the case. Our citizens must be kept safe. But at the same time, you don't want stifling regulation, which can also stifle innovation, especially at the early stages. So it's about balancing the two. And we think a mixture of sort of soft regulation, consultative approach, which is also practical, is the way to do it. So in that regard, I mean, in Singapore, we set up this foundation called AI Verify, where we actually invite companies and industry to partner with us to work on a model AI governance framework that covers the issues that we're familiar about: accountability, data use, assurance and evaluation, safety and alignment research. So we invite industry to partner with us on that journey. And we also try to make it practical. So as part of the whole AI Verify Foundation, we have an initiative to work with these companies to develop a software toolkit where actually other companies can test their AI models to test on the criteria that has been set out, that I set out earlier. So I think these are the examples where we take that consultative approach and practical approach to sort of regulation or to encourage safe and ethical use of AI. And I think not just Singapore, a lot of countries in Asia sort of takes that approach as well. So it does encourage adoption by industry. And I think one final part to note about regulation in that regard is, we also lead the sort of ASEAN, for those of you who know, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, so Southeast Asian states. We lead the sort of AI governance and guidelines effort there. Again, it's not a single market like the EU, so there is no regulation harmonization across Southeast Asia, but again, it's one through relationships, harmonization, and relationships and guidelines that we try to push it forward. Of course, we try to work bilaterally with countries like the US as well, and also through multilateral platforms like OECD. So, it's not a sure bet, but I think that's the approach that generally Asian countries take.
Yeah, so I'm mindful of time, and I just want to also ask, what are your thoughts around the ethical and responsible use of AI and how your companies can ensure that's moving forward? Because that's one of the major themes of, I think, today's conference.
Yeah, I'll take a go. I think for us, Darktrace is very kind of focused on delivering customer outcomes, right? We want to make sure that our AI is being applied to our customers' data in a way that it stops cyber attacks. And one of the things that we need to do is, and I think you've heard this theme across the panel, is it needs to be regional, it needs to be in country, you need to be listening to your customers in those different jurisdictions. And you need to be taking that back into your operating platform to then go and deliver it. So for us, this is kind of an emerging space. We've been doing AI for 10 years, but all of a sudden it's got this kind of huge attention and in different countries is being treated in different ways. My personal take is I like the kind of the Asian approach of let's kind of see where this goes. Let's work with businesses in country and come up with a framework that's going to work, rather than kind of top-down regulation straight up front. I think as we go deeper and deeper into an AI world, we're going to require something, but I see it very differently in kind of different jurisdictions.
I mean, first of all, maybe on the topic of regulations, because I think this is very important, and sometimes this is seen very negative, right? So that there are regulations, but I mean, one picture that really sticks with me is in a discussion recently, someone came up with the example of saying, if you think about if you go home now or in the evening and you're cooking a meal, right? Think about the tools that you are using to cook the meal. It might be the oven, it might be the microwave, it will be maybe a very sharp knife, and maybe other things. All these potential tools are something you can do very bad things with, right? So, but is that a reason why we should forbid an oven or a microwave or a knife? No, we need to regulate what you do with it, and this is something that's really important for me, that we don't look at, okay, let's forbid the use of data per se or whatsoever, right? But really make sure that we are very thoughtful in these regulations when it comes to, okay, what is it that you can do with it that's good, and what is it that you can do with it that's bad, and we need to regulate those things that are bad, right? And that's something that for me, when it comes to regulations, it's a nice picture that I, whenever I hear regulations, like this picture comes back in my mind, because luckily no one forbid the use of or regulated the use of microwaves, right? So because there are good things you can do with it. So at SAP, what do we do with it? And for us, it's of course, trust is the ultimate currency for us. Our customers trust us with their most critical business data. So this is something that we, no matter what kind of great technologies out there, no matter what we could potentially do, this is the ultimate currency, that we don't lose the trust and that we don't do anything that would compromise the trust that the customers are putting into us. That means we are having extremely strict regulations. We have, internal regulations, right? So guidelines. We even, like, every product that we release that has AI in it needs to go to an AI ethical review, where we make really sure that, for instance, the human always stays in charge. That's super important, right? So you don't want anything to just walk under the shades, and then no one doesn't know what's going on there. We have very strict rules on checking bias, for instance. We are operating in very critical spaces where we need to make sure that the models, that the technology doesn't infuse any bias. That's what we need to check. Right. And last but not least, of course, we need to have a certain explainability, right? So there are audits going on. We need to be able to explain why things are as they are. Of course, that's not always possible with every technology, but this is something that let's say sits on top of everything that we do, right? So that everything that we ship in our software adheres to these AI ethical guidelines that we have, and as said, that is something that is non-negotiable, as let's say the trust of our customers, what we do with their data for their businesses, is obviously the most critical thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to end off today's discussion, because the session is about Asia, I wanted to ask, what would be your advice for the room, whether or not you're a company that is thinking about going to Asia, whether or not you're a talent that is thinking about working in an Asian company, what would be your advice going into Asia? Maybe I could start with Troy?
Yeah, I would say, I will end off by how I started, right? I think the potential and promise in Asia, if we talk about, say, generative AI, it's about application, deployment, real-world impact use cases. Because, again, like I mentioned, the faster adoption nature in that area, and also the ability to work with some of the bigger players further down the stack. And I think we all want AI for good. And I think beyond theorizing about some of the black boxes that we see, the question is, how do we apply that to real-world problems? And in Asia, there are a lot of problems to be solved, because all the way from food security, sustainability, not just in a way the first world problems that we have in the Western world. So even in Southeast Asia, for example, in fintech, the underbanked, the underfinanced small businesses and small mom and pop. So we still have a lot in Asia. There's still a lot of these sort of developing country issues that, again, if you take the leapfrogging sort of dynamic of that region, there are a lot of problems to be solved. So I think that would be my main sort of encouragement about use of AI. If you have an AI technology or solution that has solved a problem in the Western world, they could be very relevant in Asia, because there's some of these dynamics involved.
Nicholas?
Yeah, First of all, I would say, think about Asia, because when you look at the 3 different compounds roughly, I think the market potential, especially on the consumer side, in Asia is tremendous. And so I do think especially European companies have a history of a natural pathway to Europe. Now, the second piece of advice, and that's me, a European working for an Asian organization, is I think even though we all think we're global citizens, and we are probably, there are regional nuances. And so I do think like I would use all the support and help that is available. I think like EDB has a really good toolkit there. Singapore specific, if you choose Singapore, I'm sure there are other organizations where you find resources as well. But I think like here, in terms of like the small little problems to solve and the nuances, I think like you can really like, I think like they can make life a lot easier. And then I think like the third thing is, given that this is really about, I mean, this is a knowledge industry, right? I think like you should really think about like where's the talent, because I think talent density matters. And I mean, we often hear kind of like that, yeah, this could be the revival of the Silicon Valley because AI competencies are so dense there. I do think there are other hubs. And so I would definitely, if I were to go to Asia, then I would look at where does the talent sits, because that's where the innovation is happening.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak. And next, we'll have our networking session. So if you have any questions that you have not answered, please feel free to engage our speakers. So before we move on, I would just like to share a number of programs that can support your expansion to Asia, like what Nicholas has mentioned. The EDB has put together some resources to help you out. So foremost, we have the Singapore Investment Clinic. So it's a on-demand video series where you can get all of your questions answered about incorporation, getting the employment pass, how do you hire the right talent, etc. And if you want to have a conversation with our expert partners, then feel free to sign up for the workshop, which is a 1-hour non-obligatory session together with these experts to answer your questions around getting to Asia. And last but not least, the Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology is coming back in the end of October. And this year, there is a special program called the AIMX. So the AIMX will be a conference session where you will get to engage with APAC AI leaders and get the latest on what's going on over there. So it will be an extension of this session, essentially. So yep, the floor is now open for you to connect. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.